excited to be here? No. See, the thing with me, energy. Energy is everything. So if we're saying we're excited, let's feel the excitement. Let's mean the excitement. Let's mean what we say. Who is excited to be here? There we go. That's what I'm talking about. Fantastic. Now, as a speaker, the energy that you give will be multiplied in what you receive. Yeah? So on behalf of all the speakers on the screen, give us that energy, give us that love, you will get much more back. I want to understand who we have in the house. I'm assuming all of us are interested in property in some way, shape or form. How many people in the house, just by show of hands, are already investing in Zim? Wonderful. Of those people, how many have more than 2 properties in Zim? The same hands again. Okay, some others are being told to put their hands up even if they don't want to do so. How many of us have properties in the UK but not in Zim? Why? Okay. How many of us think investing in Zim is a non-starter? It's a friendly space, no one's going to judge you, it's okay. You can tell the truth. I think we're all familiar with some of the challenges that we have in our market. But I think certainly for me, I'm very patriotic, I'm very pro-Zim, and I'm always saying to people that we should be investing in Zim, we should be doing different things in Zim. There are people from other countries, Look East and all the rest of it, that are going into Zim and doing phenomenal things. While some of us are sitting here, there's nothing wrong with going to your shifts, but some of us are sitting here and all we're doing is going to our shifts and wondering why other people are going and literally taking our lunch, whilst we are here in the diaspora, feeding King Charles and not really doing anything for ourselves and for our own country and for our own legacy. Okay, so again, I like stories, so bear with me. I'm going to share 1 or 2 stories. Once upon a time, I was watching a TV show, long time ago. One of these kind of English Jane Eyre, Emily Bronte type of TV shows. And there was a scene during the show where somebody said, Mr. Rolls, meet Mr. Royce. And for me, that blew my mind. Because all of us have always heard of Rolls-Royce, whether that's in aviation, in automotive, in marine. But I had never actually thought that at some point, Rolls and Royce had to meet for Rolls-Royce to become a thing. So what's the point? The point is, it's important to be in the right place at the right time. This is the right place and it's the right time. So clap for yourselves for being in the right place at the right time. As you can see on the screen, we've got a fantastic group of speakers that are going to take all of the information and share information in terms of the customer journey, in terms of how you can invest. We've got people with innovation in terms of building methods, property developers, bankers, real estate agents, a real dream power team of everything that you need in your property investment journey. Our first speaker, Mr. Vengai Manzima, who is, as you can see, senior partner of MCM Legal. Funny thing is, me and Vengai actually went to the same university. We both studied law. I was actually his senior, but funny enough, he's a senior partner, and I'm still Korokoza, but it's okay. Please join me to welcome Vengai to the stage.
Good afternoon. The MC likes stories, and I suppose I have to follow suit. The only problem is an accent problem. I do not have the same accent, and accents are very important. I'll tell you a story. When I came here last week. Arrived in London, and I had to do a few business there. And then around Thursday, I was like, okay, I'll be in Birmingham this weekend. I need to make sure I've got a fresh cut for the audience in Birmingham. I got on the bus, I went to Lewisham for a barber, for obvious reasons. And got to Lewisham. Well, was looking at, okay, a few barbershops. I saw this barbershop, seemed like a Jamaican guy. I got in the barbershop. I told him, my brother, I need a nice fresh haircut, but don't touch the top, because I'm 44 years old. I do not have a long relationship with my hair. I need to remain acquainted for as long as possible. And then he said something that was shocking. I was like, I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you just said. I don't speak Jamaican English. And then he said, I'm a trim. I was like, yes, you may trim, but not the top part. You can go this way. He says, no, I'm a trim, sit down. And for most part of that haircut, I was so scared. Because I didn't know what he was talking about. And he had tattoos and his hair was plaited, and I was being judgmental. And then he started playing gospel music. I got kind of sidetracked. I was like, you don't look like you play CC Wines. But it was, and I got a fresh cut, and here I am. So that being said, I secured my hair, and I'm supposed to talk to you. My assignment is about securing your legacy. And that being said, in terms of securing your legacy, if you don't understand what I'm saying because of the accent, if you take home anything, just take home, I'm a trim. I'm a trim. That's good enough for today. You can have the question and answer afterwards. So we're going to speak about securing your legacy. For those of us who are in Zimbabwe, that's our boy, is the late socialite. Didn't know him personally, but the whole country knew him. And I don't know if this is the back or the front of his yard. Young man used to enjoy his life. He probably lived a life that a lot of people emulate. It could be an outer ego or whatever it is. He acquired quite a handsome amount of money at a very young age. And unlike the other socialites, he actually had the assets. But we're going to talk about his legacy. And this comes from Neanda Radio. I say this so that the estate cannot sue me if I say the wrong things. I did not create this. This came from Neanda Radio. It says, almost 4 years after his untimely death, the once revered fleet of luxury vehicles has reportedly vanished. Just after 4 years. And he acquired more than 90% of this room would acquire in their lifetime. But 4 years later, for some reasons which we'll explore in my presentation, they reportedly vanished. I'm going to try not to be too legalistic in my presentation, so that at least we'll move along together. What does this teach us? This creates a serious problem. What we know from media and not as facts. So I understand these days if you're presenting, you have to say alleged, or what is alleged, etc. is that he wrote a will, but the will was never signed. It's alleged. It's also alleged that he built a multi-million-dollar house at his rural home. We'll discuss what that means from an ownership perspective. But then, before we go into this legacy thing, I'm a lawyer. I never take everything for granted. I do not even take for granted the fact that I know what legacy means. So we need to explore what is the definition of legacy. And in real estate, which we're going to be dealing with particularly, for me, we'll actually use the Oxford Languages Dictionary so that they give us definitions and then we don't take any definitions from me. It says that any amount of money or property left to someone in a will. I think that is a limited definition, but it also describes a person's legacy. And if we take that context and then we take the invalidity or validity of his will, we may then think that there was no legacy there, but we do not know for sure. But it gives two definitions, it doesn't give one definition. The next one will be the long-lasting impact of particular events, actions that took place in the past, or of a person's life. I'm still very confused, just as a side track, about where you put your commas. And I have a serious problem with my young lawyers, because I still don't believe you put a comma just before an end. That's what we were taught. I don't know if everybody was taught under the same system, or an or. You were taught under that system, eh? So whenever lawyers bring their work and I'm just reviewing them, I'm seeing all these things. And I have a serious problem with it, and I don't mind being ancient, or being considered to be ancient. So I always review, put red marks, ask questions. Where did you go to school? You know, those kind of ultimately, this is the definition, and by the below definition, we can then surmise that Genius Kadungure did leave a legacy, because 4 years later, somewhere in Birmingham, Evengai Madzima, who we never met, is speaking about him from the bottom part. Then we go to the reasons why we are here. And I'm hoping by the time I finish, just like my barber's haircut, all these things will add up. It is a beautiful haircut, confirm. Yes. That's my new barber, the Jamaican guy. I don't know his name. I probably never will. But he's amateur. That's what I call him. I say in real estate, the end of a thing is better than its beginning. How you start doesn't define how it ends. So you cannot judge your products about how you start. Sometimes you have to start by acquiring the land. Sometimes it starts with a deposit. Who only judge it towards the end, whether your investments were good investments or they were bad investments. That is my reason. But in reality, we do it for wealth building. So real estate, people use property the world over to build wealth. You know, different things as a means to get credit, to hold, retain wealth against things like inflation, etc. So there's a pillar for wealth building. We'll explore that pillar, where I then come in as the lawyer. Here we're just discussing, and maybe the property specialist will then say, no, you were very wrong. Those are not the reasons why people invest in real estate, but for me, it's one of the pillars. The other is for posterity. We have people, obviously, that want to be remembered for a very long time, but in reality, unless you have Rockefeller money, you'll probably be forgotten in 20 years. But ultimately, everybody still needs to make an attempt. So for posterity, they invest in real estate so that the names are there and they are remembered. And obviously, if you look at the other definition of posterity, so that their progeny benefits from their work. So, two-tier. The other one would be matrimonial protection. Some people invest for matrimonial protection, and we'll talk how they invest in terms of matrimonial protection. And then the last is freedom, ownership, gratification. And I say this as a side note, it may be a bit offensive, to the people who live here. But we are quite free in Zimbabwe, in the sense that, except for next month, when my kids are at holiday, I don't really have to work. But next month, I know, after next month, my children go back to school, and I have to work to raise their school fees. But as I was speaking to people in the past week, and they were giving me these what are my stories about 25-year mortgages, which thanks to our banks in Zimbabwe we do not know of. And I was thinking, that means I have to report to myself for 25 years? And I can't stop working. So people like me invest for freedom. But some of you invest for personal gratification. And when we talk about ownership gratification, we are talking about stories that say, oh, I'm the first one in my family to own a property, so my name has to be on the title deed. There are different reasons why people do different things, but this is one of the reasons: freedom, and others for ownership gratification. So we're going to explore these things. And then as you select which way you want to secure your own legacy under these pillars, I'll propose 1 or 2 ways you can do it. I'll try to be as layman as possible, and only my fellow counsel here would probably understand if I wasn't going to be. So if we're doing wealth building, one of the ways we can invest in property is through registering the properties under companies. Why would we do that? We are basically saying, we are realizing that these properties are more stock than they are long-term investments. And even if they are long-term investments, you are basically saying, I'm giving myself opportunities to dispose of this particular property under this structure. With company ownership, if the property is registered under a company in Zimbabwe, what you become are shareholders and directors of the company if you'd want. In an ideal situation, the directors, okay, in law, the directors are the ones who are responsible for the running of the company. The shareholders have limited liability. So that's a protective mechanism. But if you were to ask me, I'll probably say things like, you know what, you take that property, you put it in one company, and then it does nothing except apply for credit or be a guarantor or co-principal debtor when you then apply for loans in the banks. But the company is there. You may have to do your returns yearly, but chances are there'll be nil returns. So it's minimal cost. I've put in some of the reasons. I'll be just speaking out of the blue, just from my mind when we're talking about registering in these companies. I propose normally that the company doesn't trade, but some people will trade with it. But the risk of trading is that then the assets that you're holding under the company, they become almost liable to the debts that you accrue. So let's say, for instance, you take a loan from somebody, and your properties are registered under different structures, etc., like companies. That means your loan doesn't ultimately follow you. Yes, you have lawyers like myself who will then say, no, we'll pierce the corporate veil and do an application, etc., etc. Yes, the application can be done. But it is a difficult threshold to pass. So you're protected to an extent, and your loan doesn't follow that. This is bad advice, but you put your creditors in a position where they have to talk to you nicely. It's unfortunate, but they would have to, because they cannot attach that as the things that you own. So that's company ownership. I'll explain that more in detail by diagrams, etc. I did mention that each company is to hold one asset, that you separate the trading company from the company that is holding the asset. And then if you are interested more in posterity, in securing the future of your progeny, then you invest in trusts. I mean, you register, you create a trust, and then you register your properties under the trust. In that way, what you can do is you prescribe how you want your trust to be managed. Because we all, I don't know, the thing about being a parent, which I am, is that you cannot choose your children. And, I've got one, I was just called, he's lost his whole front set, and I don't know where he's going, but so far the signs are not looking good. I don't know. So I just might have to protect myself and my assets, because he's not protecting his. So I cannot take it for granted that he's going to protect mine. So I know. So if I'm not saying anything bad, I'm supposed to say good things about it. I'm a father, but he doesn't have his front teeth. That's a fact. That's just a fact. So I would then put my stuff, because I'm very concerned about posterity, I'm concerned about my children, I'm concerned about my grandchildren when I have them, etc. And in my trust, I'll then prescribe how I want my things to be run. I'm from Zimbabwe. By saying I'm from Zimbabwe, I know most of you are from Zimbabwe, but we are really from Zimbabwe, isn't we? We're coming from Zimbabwe right now. And I've got 5 kids because I'm from Zimbabwe. So with these 5, God knows how they're going to turn out, etc. But I have put in my trust protective mechanisms, just in case they all turn out to be bizarre, and they go to their mother's side. Okay, they come to our side, whichever way they go. You have to then prescribe things that are personal to your family setting. I mean, I do not know your family council. I do not know anything that happens there. You know it. I do not know whether you've got brothers that want to take your things, I do not know if you're the first one to make it in your family. It's always a scary thing. And I always feel sorry for the people that were the first one to make it, because everybody's looking at your things. So it's not a good thing. But anyway, I'm not from that family, so let's leave that to that. So in terms of trust ownership, we're talking about asset protection, and it's protected in a manner that you have prescribed. I'm always against situations whereby people instruct their lawyers to draft a trust and then they do not participate in that trust, because what you end up having is a Mazima trust, which protects the Mazima people, and it's got nothing to do with any Nyasemas, it's got nothing to do with anybody. And then when a situation does arise, that's when you realize that it is better if you're a Mazima, and the trust does not work towards what you wanted it to work towards. So you should always be able to participate in that process. So the other benefits that come from that is obviously you've got tax efficiency. You don't pay estate duty because the property will always be in the trust when you die. It doesn't become a part of your personal estate. Although things like capital gains tax, etc. are also charged on the trust. And your conditions of sale can be prescribed by the trust. In terms of conditions of sale, I'll tell you a true story. There was a gentleman that was living here. He's a friend, so it's not a client. It's almost like the Chinimbi Meta. His mother fell ill. He came to Zimbabwe. And they were two in their family. And then, unfortunately, the mother passed away. He's a friend. And then he started selling off everything. I mean, the parties were nice, though I attended some of the parties. They were good. But, I mean, we were celebrating the mother's work in a roundabout way, if you want to look at it from that perspective. But they were movables. So you sold off all the movables, literally, from the business and the houses. The mother had done exceptionally well in her lifetime. But then came to the immovables. The immovables were registered under a trust, and the terms of the trust was that he was supposed to consult with his sibling. The sibling turned out to be like the other parent because the sibling was not having it. And up to today, my friend lives off rentals from the mother's houses because we did not party the mother's houses away. That's one of those situations where the trust then takes care of your issues after the fact. So, in a situation where you want to then combine wealth building and posterity, I just did a small diagram. You have to understand, I don't come from the background where we draw a lot of diagrams, etc. But at the top you will have the trust, which owns 100% of the holding company. So the shares of the trust, whatever it is called, would own 100% of the holding company. The holding company ultimately will own 100% of company one, which only owns property one and doesn't own anything else. The second company will be owned 100% by the holding company, which owns property two and doesn't own anything else. Same with third company, property three doesn't own anything else, and the fourth company can be the operating company, where you actually do your business from. So the operating company is owned 100%. Your biggest handicap or headache will be the operating company, because the operating company is going to create debt and problems. And you do not want that operating company to follow you. And when you want to deal with issues like you want to raise money, etc., you can actually get resolutions that one of those companies will guarantee the debt and then they put up the property. So each property is dealt with by its own. I was at one time in life, I actually was a CEO of a company where we had two, an operating company and an asset holding company. But in there we had all the assets in there ultimately. And as a CEO of a company operating in Zimbabwe, we went into corporate rescue, then liquidation, the normal stuff. But the assets of the companies were protected under a different structure. And obviously, the things that to be negotiated, schemes of arrangement, etc., where the creditors were paid off things. So when you're looking at securing or getting into the business of real estate, you have to start thinking along these lines. And this is critical. A lot of people then say to themselves, I do not have capacities to be investing in this way. As a young lawyer, first thing I did was create a trust. I had no assets. And my life has been easier ever since, because now all I had to do was to put whatever I had created into this trust or under different structures without necessarily having to go through the cost of then transferring what I had purchased before into these structures. I like the cheaper, easier way of doing things. So this is one of the ways. And this is targeted mainly to people who are looking for wealth building in real estate and posterity. Then we talk about matrimonial protection, and this is critical. In terms of matrimonial protection in Zimbabwe, the first part is that all our marriages are out of community of property. And because they are, it follows that people own what they own individually and they do not own it communally or as a couple when the marriage subsists. And in the event that the marriage breaks or there's divorce summonses, the property for the short term becomes, it's not really owned by either, in that period when we're going through the court process. But at the very end of it, what the judge will consider is the contribution. It's not a clear-cut 50% situation as you have it in other jurisdictions. We talk about the contributions that you made towards the purchase. That is what is then calculated. So contributions obviously like homemaking and then school runs, etc. and cooking. Is that bad? Those are contributions that are considered because it's a very big contribution. They are considered, but they are not considered from the 50-50 perspective. So it may come up to 20%. It may be 25%. If you had 2 maids and a gardener and a driver, then maybe it can be 10%. I mean, honestly, and then a chef, this should be 5%. Honestly, I don't know which judge will give more than 5%, but if he does, he does. But it's a contribution, so school, in the morning, get the kids ready. There was a maid that got the kids ready, and the maid that cooked for the kids, and then there was a chef, and then the driver was waiting outside. Yeah, let's weigh your contribution here. Maybe 5%. So normally what people then do is they joint ownership of the property is a matrimonial protection mechanism. Because if all our properties are out of community of property, that means your 50% of that property is owned outside of that marriage, and so is the other 50%. So that helps. Only problem is, on sale, joint owners have to agree and sign together, which is a big problem. And why I say this, I know of a couple, they're quite big in Zimbabwean real estate, and the agents may know these people. I just don't know if they know the story of these people, so I will not mention their names. They basically bought a house somewhere around maybe middle density. Maybe we can call it lower middle density in Zimbabwe. The man and the woman had a knack of sprucing up properties. They basically spruced their properties up towards Boroto Brook, where they eventually ended up in. And obviously, the first days after having done up the property, there was then that fight that somebody else is attached to the property and the other is thinking economically about the property. And since this country is very sensitive to issues of sex and which person it is, I would not say it. If I was in Zimbabwe, I would say who was very attached and who was thinking about the money. But now I won't. I'll just let you guys assume who it was. But there was one who was, and the other, I'm just saying, I won't say it. I need to go back to Zim. So apparently, eventually, the other partner caught on to it 3-4 houses later, and they started doing it for fun. And the person considered his properties as stocks. He never looked at them from, with affection, from a home eye. He looked at it from an economic eye. How much value can I add here so I can sell? But they finally made it to where they were going. But if you have this kind of setup, and the other partner who's affectionate, about these things, and gets attached and thinks about the history that how the children had themselves at that property and the memories and all sorts of strange things. You may get to 90 still living in the same house. I don't know, because they won't sign the other part and you can't move. So that will be the handicap if you are looking at it from that perspective. But if you are looking at protection, then it's one way of looking at it. A joint owner is capable of selling and transferring their individual interest. This is a serious problem, which means ultimately you can just end up with me as your partner in that house. And since our house is ownership in Zimbabwe of a property, we call it undivided because as long as there's no permit dividing the house saying this side belongs to you, this side belongs to me, it ultimately means this bedroom belongs to me and you. The kitchen, I say it with emphasis, the kitchen belongs to both of us. And the lounge, the garden, the toilet. So if I end up owning the house with you, you cannot tell me that I can't sleep in the bedroom. I mean, we own it together. So that's the other handicap. So I really hope there will not be a situation where you end up owning it with myself. Also, a joint owner cannot be forced to sell their interest. Well, that's partially true because in the end, under extreme circumstances, you can request the court to force them to sell it. But obviously it's a question of the judge weighing whether or not your proposition makes sense and requires and empowers the court to affect your ownership rights. You know, the courts they are reluctant, but this has happened before. That's joint ownership. And the last one we talk about is personal gratification. I put freedom on the side because I'm not going to talk about freedom as much as I spoke about in the beginning. Here, this is obviously where you own the property. Main thing is the property becomes a part of your estate. When you have debts, people can attach lawyers. It's easy for us to identify who owns the property. And once we do, we can attach the property after having taken away your movables. Us as a firm, personally, we enjoy attaching in December just before Christmas. Somehow it's got more results than than the other times. You just wait until the invitations for the Christmas parties go out, and then you come and you take all the sofas. And then after that, you know the visitors are going to sit on the floor. Somehow, for some weird reason, money starts to come out for some strange reason. We have found that to be very useful. And for those who collect debts, I think you should use that method. Christmas, Easter, big holidays. And then the benefits, obviously, of having the property in your name is that you benefit from some tax exemptions. Or if there's transfer between spouses, you get exempted. I've never really found a non-criminal reason for transfer between spouses. But it happens. And since property is owned out of community of the marriage, that means it can be protected by that transfer. But anyway, every time you see this, there's something going on. And then obviously you have, if you're selling your principal private residence and you're above 55, you're exempt for capital gains tax. By principal private residence, we mean the residence where you actually live, where your bills come, etc. But we have seen people then who look for the most expensive property and then call it their principal private residence. Yeah, I think I've spoke about most of the things that come on this one. So now we go back to the estate and consequences on death. What happens? And here we're going to talk about the property that is actually registered in your name. The other ones, they do not form a part of that because they are not owned by you. So we are just limited to that particular property. Nobody likes to talk about this particular topic. I promise you, I made so much money with this topic in 2000. That COVID thing should come back. No? Okay, a lot of people came. Everybody was talking about death. I'm sorry. I did make a lot of money in 2000. Everybody wanted to sort out their estate. But these are the consequences on when you die and an executor is appointed. And it is preferable when you die that you die with a will. And then in your will, you then appoint your executor. Your executor, not your executor. Your executor is the guy who probably killed you. The executor is the guy who takes care of the estate after you die. It's very critical that you select your executor properly, because the executor is ultimately the person who's going to be responsible for your estate. The law obviously has put in safeguards, fiduciary responsibility, big words, to make sure that the executors act properly. But they start off as human beings before they are clothed with this title. So the executor must then be interested in ensuring that your estate is wound up in a manner that would be to your wishes. And I've had one estate, funny estate, where the gentleman was given, the gentleman had cancer, so he had a lot of time to think about how his things should be managed. And he appointed me de facto the executor of that estate. And told me point blank, this brother is going to do this, that person is going to do that. I couldn't believe what was happening. Everybody did what he said they would do. Everybody. This guy is going to come, he's going to be the nice, he's the one that's going to be sent as the goodie. Don't trust him. He's going to be nice to you, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. Only two things that he missed was that 3 of his friends came to make claims on that property. Out of debts they couldn't prove, there was nothing there, and one of the 2 friends first came and inquired in a nice way, obviously, oh my God, this has happened. What did he really have? I thought, wow, that's a very strange question. That since he's shown me the time, since we're still crying, we need to know what this guy had. But I didn't answer that because of the privilege side of things. But then people started making strange claims to that estate. So he missed 1 or 2 people, but the majority of the people, he was point on. So I'm going to rush through the remaining so that at least I deal with time. So if there's no will, ultimately, the law prescribes how the estate should be distributed. Priority is spouse and children. On spouse and children, I think I wrote about this a week or 2 weeks ago, where we have another case where a young spouse, where a man in the latter years of his life decided to finally leave, and then married a very beautiful young woman who had her own daughter, and they didn't share a child. I saw the woman because I was representing her. She was beautiful. So I don't really blame this guy. And only problem I had was really his ex-wife had like 5 children, and everybody seemed to live off this farm. It had title deeds, etc., etc. And what we argued and won on was that she was the surviving spouse. But what it meant in reality was we had to transfer the title deed to her. And when she died, it had to go to a daughter who wasn't his. And that whole estate had gone. That is the reality of a no-will situation. And I do not think in my mind that that's what the men expected would happen. I do not think so. But the law is stubborn and fair. It's not moral. The law is fair. And the law talks about spouse and children. It doesn't necessarily. So if the spouse is the high priority in a matrimonial home, she's the one who gets it, whether she has your children or not. That's what happened. There are other benefits there that I'll just skip. Also, in terms of a will you could give usufructional rights, this is a situation obviously where you then appoint, if you've got a spouse and you want to actually leave the property to your son, you protect her rights by basically saying until she dies or gets remarried. That's a good one. Then the property belongs to her. You choose how you want to frame it. It's ultimately yours. So that way, if the kids become delinquents, they will not chase their mother or father from the house. So it's a useful way to do it. I'll skip through most of this, and then maybe marital consequences. We spoke a bit about it. I'll just skip through it, and I'll skip through this one so I can finish. In terms of ownership, it's good to ensure that there are title deeds, and so that title deeds are registered against the world. Complete protection when there's title deeds. Session is your local council or developer sessions. Most of these guys will probably give you sessions if the development is still ongoing. Protects you, but it's important that your relationship is directly with the developer or the local council. It's very critical. It cannot be through patience, the estate agent. You must request that you speak to the developer. I'll skip through these ones. And then I think the last thing I'll talk about, the current opportunities that are there. In Zim, we have the farm title deeds that are coming up, the land policy. It's an opportunity, especially for the diaspora market. I say this intentionally because obviously when the land reform happened, some of you, even myself, were not in Zimbabwe and were not beneficiaries of that policy. And some beneficiaries maybe do not enjoy farming. So there's an opportunity to purchase the land that is still coming as an opportunity. Structurally, the ministry hasn't finished as far as our consultations have gone on how it's going to happen. But once it's in a title deed, I actually suspect that all you have to get is a certificate of no present interest and you'll be able to transfer. So you have an opportunity to raise your capital. And then prior on that, in this particular situation, when eventually the lawyers in Zimbabwe figure out how we're going to do it, and we see the terms that will come out on the title deeds, which I suspect will have restrictive covenants, almost similar to the ones that were on the previous farm title deeds. People can be able to purchase, and that market is going to be open for 6 months or so to a year before the prices start going berserk. Why I say before the prices start going berserk, because if I buy and I'm not the one who's selling, it is at a profit. That is for sure. So obviously the opportunity will be a first time in. And we also know that there's now the urban policy. I hope the other presenters are going to speak a lot on this one. It just came up about 2 weeks or a week and a half ago. It was published by the president. I know our office is still trying to study it and its effect on things like gentrification, etc. So I will not be able to present a lot about it, but it's happening now and it affects your investment. But anyway, the overarching objective of this policy is to ensure that there is better development within the country. So it's beneficial as far as we are aware. But I do not have the details. My time is up. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you so much. I think that's what us young people call free game. Lots of free information. I won't ask you what your hourly rate is, because I don't think most of us can afford it, but that was so much value. Thank you so much. Could I please request those of us at the back, please come to the front. All of us at the front are very nice. We will not bite you unless you want us to. We will not hurt you. Please come to the front so that the people that are coming late will have somewhere to sit. So I'll just give you 2 seconds for you to move towards the front as I introduce our next speaker. The law is fair. It is not moral. The law is fair. It is not absolutely. We were talking about legacy, and one of the things that Vengai said, that the end of a thing is better than its beginning. One of the things that I'm personally very passionate about, as I said earlier, energy is everything. Energy is important. Those of us building homes, those of us owning homes, We need energy. Is anybody from Zessa in the building? Okay. I don't think I need to say anything else. I think we know where this is going. Our next speaker is Mchaneta Sekai Elliott Swan. Sorry, did I butcher that? My apologies. And she's going to be talking, well, I'll let her do her speech, but she's going to be talking about future building, innovations in how to build properties, how to, well, please welcome Mchaneta. Thank you.
Hello everybody. Ore Magadini. Salimonani. Did I get that right? To my fellow Diasporians and distinguished guests, welcome. My name is Mchaneta Sekai Elliott Swan. I am the co-founder and Chief Business Development Officer for Future Solar Technologies. Sorry, I'm a bit technology challenged. I have lived, studied, and worked across Europe, the US, and Africa. I was raised by matriarchs, academics, visionaries, pioneers. I am really struggling with this. There we go. Right. And pioneers. Their legacy shaped my commitment to enterprise, collaboration, and uplifting communities. I build ventures that use technology to deliver meaningful, lasting impact. My paternal grandfather, Dr. Joseph Mandibashiri, left Africa for Britain in the 1960s, and that is where my diasporic lineage in Europe began. He was the first in line of scholars in my family, and from him I've inherited a blueprint for excellence, the ability to hold tradition and intellect in one steady hand. My maternal grandmother, Mayambuya, came from Malawi and Mozambique to then Rhodesia in the 1950s. I speak Shona because of her. She gave me the language, culture, and purpose. She passed down the Ubuntu mindset, a legacy of wholeness, humility, and the grace to keep moving forward while giving back. Innovation, for me, is a disciplined tool for improving lives. Like many in the diaspora, I carry the weight of what was left behind. This is how the story begins. When was the last time you got a message from home saying, there's no electricity? Oh, has it not gone through?
There's no electricity.
Magetsayenda, you're sure? Yeah, I don't know, it's like playing up. You know? Okay. The arrows, is it easier? Okay, is that, I need to use that. Okay. Okay, you can do it for me. Okay, you can like put it down wherever I'm like reading. Okay. When was the last time you got a message from home saying there's no electricity? Magetsayenda. As Ambuya used to say, Paride magetsi mzukuru. Even in South Africa, they have turned load shedding into national genre. The jokes fly around faster than electricity, as if laughter alone could keep the lights on. But let's pause here. Why have we normalized this? Zimbabwe needs at least 3,500 megawatts to meet its full electricity demand, yet we generate less than half. We can solve this problem, but not with the same outdated models. I am not here to debate ZESA, guys, or ESCOM. I am here to say we are past the era of fixing broken grids. Technology is moving fast, so must we. We no longer need to bolt panels onto rooftops like an afterthought, or scatter panels across land like patchwork. We now have the tools to design power, purpose, and beauty into the very fabric of our buildings. Not just to survive power cuts, but to redefine. We live, build, and thrive. This isn't just solar, it's integrated, modular, scalable, engineered to last. This is the future of solar, not an upgrade or a quantum leap. Before we talk about innovation, energy, or housing, let me start with a belief. Africa is not behind. Africa is the blueprint. That belief drives everything we do at Future Solar Technologies. Solar built in. This is not a house with solar panels. This is a self-sustaining, clean energy ecosystem that happens to be your home. Smart homes, smart living. Our buildings are constructed 3 times faster than traditional build. They are 40% more cost effective per square meter. They produce 0 emissions and generate more energy than they consume. This is innovation made tangible, and this is what Zimbabwe's been waiting for. Let's compare. Traditional builds. Brick by brick, slow to construct, expensive to scale, dependent on the grid, and still need solar panels added after. Future solar technology built, sleek, solar embedded. We don't add solar after, we embed it into the walls, in the skin, in the soul of the structure. It's modular, it's ready to go, and it's brilliant by design. Right, let's start with Zimbabwe. The first 5 homes will be piloted at Mfeni Valley Resort by Ziv Zimbabwe in 2026. Be among the first to own a home in this visionary development, where sustainability meets design and modern African living takes shape. If you miss out on the first 5, don't worry, there are 245 more on the way, and after that, thousands. The time to invest is now, guys. But this is not just about housing. We are building clinics, hospitals, schools, factories, student accommodations, all using modular leapfrog technology. Each structure is smart, fast to build, and energy self-sufficient. This is how we scale dignity. This is how community power is born. These buildings can even power existing homes and infrastructure nearby. Modular, solar, integrated housing isn't just a climate solution, it's a national necessity. Diaspora, now this is your moment. Our 1 million seed round is open now. We are partnering with Ziv Zimbabwe and British Africa Business Alliance. We have patented the technology with Africa Regional IPO. We are building the first modular solar factory in Belfast, where my husband comes from. The second in Zimbabwe. We will create over 1,750 direct jobs in Zimbabwe and 5,000 more through local contractors, transport, training and services. It's not just infrastructure, it's economic rebirth. It's local empowerment. The return of investment for phase 1 is projected to break even within 18 to 24 months, with the scaling into Southern Africa, driving exponential returns within 5 years. The factory doesn't just build homes, it builds industry. Now guys, imagine every home a powerhouse. In 5 years, we will power 200,000 lives. We will displace 129,000 tons of CO2, and we will do it together. Powered by the sun, designed by visionaries, and owned by the people. This is how community-powered infrastructure is. This is how we build the future together. The time to invest back home is now. We are building the future. If you're serious about energy, housing, and innovation, come and see our technology. We are exhibiting now. Meet the people behind the technology. My husband, Julian Swan. And we've also got Dr. Gugs the Shy with us, who's our NED. And I'm actually quite shorter than you. So, my name is Muchaneta. It's nice because I know that a lot of people can actually pronounce my name. Muchaneta Sekai. Elliot Swan, the CBDO for Future Solar Technologies. Thank you, Tatenda Siabonga.
Another round of applause for Mchanesa, please. It's nice to see diasporans who are multilingual. Time is fast spent, so we're going to keep things moving. I know there are so many questions coming out. Please write your questions down. We shall be having a question and answer session a little bit later. I certainly had a lot of questions that I wrote down from the last couple of presentations. We're going to move straight on to the next speaker, which, if I could just find my notes, is... Where's the next speaker? Sorry, 1 second. Our next speaker is Mr. Munatsi Manyande from Velde Estates, who's a property developer. Please give him a warm round of applause.
Start to have trouble setting up my presentation. The president has been set. So bear with me. Just kidding.
Okay guys, just while we're waiting for the technology to do what technology does anybody have any burning questions for Vengai or for Janetta? Okay, I have one. Why would you want to, okay, let me paint the picture. I think the statistics are like 50% of marriages end in divorce. And then maybe I think like another 20% don't want to stay, but they do for the kids or for the financial reasons. So from a protection perspective, how does that... I think we know where this is going. From a protection perspective, how does that work in terms of how you set up your assets and your structures?
Those are terrible stats that you have given us. Legally and structurally, we were already given methods of setting up protection mechanisms. This is one of the methods. Traditionally speaking, you get married out of community of property and it doesn't become in community. And as a lawyer, if I had a ring, I'll be a terrible lawyer. Because it means that I've signed a contract where we have shared what we have. That's the first thing. But I'm also married like everybody else here. I'm just married at a different ratio, which protects certain assets against certain things, but we do not see it from marrying for purposes of divorce. Obviously, some people sign prenups. That happens. And it's always difficult to advise with these things because you are ultimately entering a marriage for purposes of exiting. It's a terrible concept. It's a terrible concept. But what actually happens in reality and in life is that my experiences are, and this one is for the benefit of men in here, is men are reactionary to divorces and women are proactive. 90% of my women clients who have been working together through the divorce process for a year before we get there. The 10% of my male clients are saying she cheated. I don't want anything.
Thank you very much, Vengai.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak in front of you all today. My name is Munatsi Manyande, also a son of the soil, I guess, from Zimbabwe, like many of us here. I have the kind of unique distinction of being somebody that's investing in Zimbabwe in property development quite a bit, but also living in the diaspora. So I live in the United States, I live in Texas, and it's been a real interesting journey over these last several years as we've become more and more active as an investor back in Zimbabwe. So my job this afternoon is to share a little bit of kind of my story, my journey, in the hopes that we can convince more people to dip their toes into investing in Zimbabwe, because I think somebody mentioned that whether we're involved or not as Zimbabweans in the diaspora, stuff is happening. Other people are stepping into the void, and a lot of them are doing really well for themselves. And so I will start by just really quickly telling you my background, and then going into a little bit of my story about this company called Velda Estates that brings me to this conference and this expo this weekend. I was born and raised in Zimbabwe. Was born in Bulawayo, and then raised my parents moved to Harare just before I started school. So one of those kids, in fact, it's always kind of funny because I was fluent at Ndebele before I was fluent at any other language. And then they moved me to Harare and nobody spoke to me in Ndebele. And so now, you can't talk about me for sure if you were speaking in Ndebele, but if I try to speak back, I have to kind of try to remember words. It's labored. But it's good to be here. I went to school all the way through high school in Zimbabwe and then left to go to university. I went to university in the United States and then actually moved back to Zimbabwe for a while and then moved back to the States. Again, once my wife wanted us to be a bit more kind of stable and settled with the kids, and it was coming out of the Zim hyperinflation days and some of that chaos. And so that's a bit of my background. But I have been active in investing in Zimbabwe for a while now. Initially went into kind of the agriculture space, so I've been working, investing in doing business as a cattle rancher in Zimbabwe, and I've been doing that for about 10 years now, and have a pretty sizable operation that we've been able to grow, and that's been a fun project to be a part of. And I encourage you, if that's of interest to you, to get into farming, cattle ranching especially is a real passion of mine, and it's been lucrative as we've learned to do it better over the years and improved our own processes. And then a few years ago, a friend of mine approached me. We'd done some business together in the past, and he approached me about an opportunity to purchase some land, specifically to develop and then to sell as residential stands. And so we spent a lot of time trying to understand that opportunity. I'll be honest, the first time he spoke to me about it, my initial response was, because we all, we've heard so many stories of people that try to get into property development, or even people just bought land. They bought a stand and then only to find out later that what they thought they bought, they didn't buy, or 3 people were sold the same piece of land, or they were promised that they'd be able to get title, and then that didn't happen, and just a lot of stuff. So I was quite nervous, but we also spent some time kind of talking and doing research. We spent quite a bit of money paying lawyers like Menga here to investigate the opportunity and to kind of make sure we understood what we were getting ourselves into. And then we decided to eventually kind of get in. And so that's a little backstory that I'll start with. And then because I don't want to go too long, I will just kind of talk to you about, I've split up my talk into just kind of a couple of topics, so to speak. And so my friend came to me with an opportunity. Okay, this opportunity was, there's some land that's available, within the Harare area. It's part of an area where a lot of the city of Harare is growing towards. So our land is just on your way to Norton from the center of town, just after Snake Park. There's kind of an area that used to be called a farm called Spitzkop, many years ago. And so we bought a chunk of land there that we've been developing. And so, that was the opportunity. The city of Harare obviously is going to have to grow outwards. There's not much you can do within the city limits itself. Just like every other city in the world, as it grows, you've got to expand and go out. Everybody knows about the housing shortages in the country of Zimbabwe. Those are well documented at all levels. I mean, when you read the numbers, you hear that there's 2 million houses that we're short of in the country, and things like that. So there's a real need, that's there. And then what's happened also is in Zimbabwe, we kind of went through, that period coming out of hyperinflation and everything, where it felt like there wasn't much that was happening in terms of actual, property development. And so we've kind of fallen behind. And what that's done is put a lot of pressure on the existing housing inventory. And so that's why you keep hearing of some of these rental prices sometimes that people are talking about within the cities that sound exorbitant. Because when you're on the outside, you kind of think, wait, I don't understand how the rentals could be that high. But a lot of it is just that there just isn't enough supply to meet the demand. And so there's that opportunity. there's also this opportunity that because of the economic challenges that we faced in Zimbabwe, there's not been enough investment into real estate, into property development by the big corporates that we've always known of, by the government entities, like your NASA's and then the Public Service Commission now. I know we've been doing quite a bit of work in that space. But there just hasn't been enough investment since really independence to be able to tackle this particular problem. So what that means is if you can come in as an investor and get into this space, it's there are no guarantees in any business, ever whatsoever. But it's as long as you're kind of working with the right time frames and you're patient and are doing things the right way, it's really, really hard to lose in this space. The people that I've seen, that I know of, that have gone into it and have done it wrong, have typically, worked with unrealistic time frames, unrealistic expectations. In fact, this property that we bought, somebody had been wanting to do some development work, and they'd kind of taken some shortcuts in a bid to try to, make a quick buck, and it hadn't worked out, and they were in trouble financially and needed to get out, and that's how we got into it. So the opportunity exists because of those factors that I've outlined, and also, as we try to kind of become more and more efficient as a country, there are opportunities for what I call outsized returns as a direct result of the inefficiencies that we sometimes see in the country. I'll give an example. So when we were, trying to decide whether or not we were going to purchase this land for development, we spoke with some experts, who, I wanted to understand, okay, so if we're buying this land, we needed to start the process of getting all the subdivision permits and all the local government, permissions from scratch. And I wanted an idea of how long it would take us to get all those permissions, just so we could understand what we're getting ourselves into. And every single expert we spoke to told us, 3 to 6 months, 3 to 6 months, you'll have all the paperwork, no big deal. Ask me how long it took. How long did it take? So we went in thinking 3 to 6 months. It ended up taking us 2.5 months, 2.5 years to get all the necessary paperwork and things like that. And some of it also as you're getting into the devil is always in the details. You buy this piece of land and everyone's telling you this is actually zoned under the city of Harare or whatever. So this is how it's going to work. As you start the process, you actually find out, a portion of this land is actually Zimbabwe District Council. So all the permitting and stuff has to happen in Chinoy and not in Harare. And all the experts that were, we've been speaking to had assured us it was city of Harare. And they also told us, no, but then we've got all the contacts that you need to make it work in Harare. But now that is Zimbabwe. So now you've got to figure out how to get that done. So now you're trying to establish relationships there, and you're trying to start that whole process. There's environmental impact assessments that you've got to get done. That's a whole conversation. Needless to say, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months went by. And then when we thought we were close, we also discovered, oh, by the way, because this used to be a farm, you need a certificate of no present interest from the government as part of the paperwork. Basically, the government needs to say that this farm, we have no plans for this farm, as government. And so that's a whole other process. And the time we started that process, there was also like a reshuffle within government. And so the guy that would have been the person to make that decision all of a sudden found himself in a different job. And the new guy comes in and he needs a bit of time to actually kind of understand what's going on and what's really going on. So it took 2.5 years. But we eventually got the permits and the things that we needed, and we were able to move on. What's fascinating is that a lot of people, even outsiders, non-Zimbabweans, have understood that that there are these inefficiencies and are willing to pay when you've been able to kind of navigate those. I say that because a week after we got our final permits and approvals for this development that we've been working on, we actually got a call from a Chinese investor who says to us, look, we know you bought this land, and we know you now have these permits. And they were willing to pay us 3 times what we paid for the land, right there. a week after we'd gotten those permits. And so obviously we would have made some money, some good money by doing that. But we also knew that they weren't offering this money for us this money out of Zanga Ziritsitsi. It was it's an opportunity, and they saw that there was a lot of money to be made down the road. So I share that story just to kind of help people understand that you have to get into a lot of this stuff with your eyes wide open. Everybody, in Zimbabweans we have this tendency to be overly optimistic when we're talking about plans and things like that, when we're making commitments about payments and things like that. And generally everybody's overly optimistic, but the reality is things can take time. Okay, so that was the opportunity we were presented, and we eventually decided that we were going to do our best to pursue this opportunity. I'll touch on the challenges a little bit, and I'll summarize. Zimbabwe is a low trust environment. I think that's a fact. We live in our country is a low trust environment. In other words, everybody is skeptical. People that you guys that have come here, who are considering buying stands, buying land in Zimbabwe. Every person you're speaking to, you're skeptical. You're not really sure. Are they really telling you the truth? Is there an angle that they're keeping hidden from you? Because people have been burnt, and we've heard stories of people who've been burnt. So it's a low trust environment, from a business standpoint. It's a low trust environment even from relationships, right? Just even the romantic relationships and things like that. It's become quite a low trust environment in that regard. And so that is a challenge. And so even when we've done when we've tried to figure out how to execute this business project and how to be able to sell these stands, we're constantly asking ourselves, before we get in front of a potential buyer, how do we anticipate their trust concerns? Because they're going to be there. And so that is a challenge, navigating that low trust environment just in general. Like I said, experts told us it would take 3 months to get our permits, and it took 30 months. We've had challenges with our currency, right, in Zimbabwe. Where we remember the days of, I grew up, I'm an 80s baby. So I grew up, in the 90s, back when, my grandmother, my ampuya would give me, the blue $2 note. And that was real money that you could do something with, kind of growing up. By the time I was, leaving high school, we'd had the, just transition where the currency had started to weaken and things like that, and we eventually went through that hyperinflation, and then went for a period of time where we actually had no local currency, and then now we've kind of had several iterations of a local currency, and that that kind of lack of stability has caused has made people very kind of antsy about investing and putting their money in Zimbabwe, right? That's a legitimate challenge, a legitimate issue. Okay. We've also found, ended up, because of the low trust environment and because of some of the economic challenges we've faced, there's a lot of short-term thinking that's prevalent in Zimbabwe. And so what happens is when people are doing business, a lot of times in Zimbabwe, everyone's trying to kind of, I'm going to try to kill this customer and just try to extract as much as I can from them, because I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to extract anything from somebody else, tomorrow. And so that short-term kind of, thinking has paralyzed our economy in a lot of different ways. And that creates challenges, because what now that means is, even when you're hiring contractors to do business, on a project like ours, you have to be very diligent about finding people that are willing to do things the right way and that aren't just looking to take shortcuts. Because the tendency is to say, I can take a shortcut. I know the inspector that's going to come and do this inspection, so we don't have to do the job well, because we can just give them money for a drink when they come and inspect. So there's a lot of that, those challenges. And unfortunately, when you're trying to do things the right way and play the long game, that can be challenging, because sometimes people legitimately don't understand why you're insisting on doing things the right way. It's like, but you should not have achieved. So that becomes there's another challenge to anticipate. And then there's also just the corruption, that now exists in our society, and it really is endemic. And so what happens is, unfortunately, when we're doing business and there's a lot of corruption that you're having to deal with, if I have to pay a bribe for certain things to happen, for certain things to move on my particular project, I have to track that cost. I'm putting that down as an actual business expense. So what that means is, when it's time to sell those stands to you guys, your hardworking diasporans who are trying to buy a stand for yourself because you want to build back home, there's an element of the cost I have to pass on to you that is really just driven by the fact that somebody else insisted on wanting this money to make this work. And so that's part of what drives the cost of doing business and everything. And it affects all of us. I'm obviously not saying this because I'm trying to point fingers and say, who's doing what, or this is not a moral conversation. It's just the reality of what we're dealing with. And that is one of those challenges again. So if you are looking to go into Zimbabwe and you want to do business, those are things that you're going to have to grapple with. But I can guarantee you, anyone that has to, and who feels like they have to, pay a bribe to make things move forward for them, they will pass that cost on to you when you make the purchase. And at the end of the day, we're all losing. And I'll shift to the solutions. I think that's more fun. Here's what we found. Okay, there are a couple of sectors in Zimbabwe's economy where, if you're in the diaspora and you want to invest, but also are trying to manage your risk a little bit, there are a couple of sectors that you can consider that at least have worked for us. And real estate is one of those spaces, because even if I have currency concerns, even if I'm not as confident in the ZiG currency and I'm worried about what will happen in 12 months' time or 24 months' time or whatever, if I put my money in a piece of land, I know that even if the currency changes, even if we de-dollarize, and move completely to a Zimbabwe dollar, or we go back to a complete, foreign currency regime, my piece of land is not going anywhere. It's going to be there. I will find it where I left it. So real estate is a good place where, if you're somebody from the diaspora and you're trying to figure out a way to kind of dip your toes, that can be a good place. Obviously, you've got to always do your due diligence. Don't be cheap. When you go and see, the lawyers like Mr. Matsima and they, give you their bill, I promise you it's better to pay them upfront for the due diligence they do for you than what you're going to have to pay them to clean up a mess, a few years down the road when that happens. But that, those are, real solutions for yourselves. So real estate is a good place to be. I mentioned that I do quite a bit of cattle ranching myself. That's been a good place for me as well, because I know I can count my mombes, I know where they are, and it's pretty easy to liquidate as well if I need to turn them into cash. And so those are some of the things that I keep in mind when I'm trying to make decisions about things to invest in. Other solutions that you would consider if you wanted to invest in property in Zimbabwe. Play long-term games with long-term minded people. I say the short-termism that is in Zimbabwe, if you try to play that game, and you're not in Zimbabwe, the guys on the ground will play it better than you. 10 times out of 10. Because they're shortcuts, they're tricks, they're things that they are finding out about that we won't find out about until, months later, because they're on the ground. But if you're playing long-term games with long-term minded people, it doesn't really matter what's happening in the short term. At least that's been my experience. Okay? We bought a piece of land, we paid for it, and then we waited 2.5 years before we actually could start developing it. And that was fine, because that piece of land was not going anywhere. We got it at a really good price. And so even if we had not been able to get the permits that we needed and we needed to put it back on the market and be patient, I'm confident we would have been able to get our money back plus some, just by kind of playing the long game. Okay? My business partner in this project is somebody who's he lives in Zimbabwe and kind of is the guy on the ground, and he plays long-term games, and so that helps, to be able to be working with somebody that's like-minded in that respect. I would also say with Zimbabwe in general, use patient capital if you can. In other words, Zimbabwe is a really tricky place for you to go to your local bank here in the diaspora and borrow money that you intend to, and that you need to pay back in 6 months. Go and deploy it in a project in Zimbabwe because somebody told you, 2 months, I can guarantee you, 2 months are going to come, 4, 6, and then your bank is going to start knocking on your door. And the guy in Zimbabwe is going to be telling you some stories. So, if you're going to go into Zimbabwe and try to do business, use patient capital, use long-term capital as much as possible. What we've done with our project is we decided, okay, we were going to self-finance this whole thing. So when we bought the land, we used money that we had, we paid for it. We didn't borrow money from anybody. And so when we suddenly had to wait 2.5 years to get all the permits that we needed, I didn't have a bank or somebody that I borrowed from who was knocking on my door to say, bro, you promised me my money 9 months ago, what's going on? And that helped us out. And I'll tell you, in fact, the guy that we bought the land from, part of the problem he had was he'd actually borrowed some money, kind of short-term money, thinking he'd be able to do a kind of a quick flip. And by the time he was selling to us, I guarantee you, he was not selling it at the price that he would have wanted. But he just was trying to put out a fire. Okay, so use patient capital to the extent possible if you were going to do business in Zimbabwe. Preferably your capital, if you can. Because also, if you do, if you raise money and use other people's money, make sure they understand what you're getting them into. Especially, Zimbabweans will understand it a little bit, but if they're non-Zimbabweans, there are things that happen in Zimbabwe that can happen in Zimbabwe that, when you start explaining to your partner, sometimes it feels like, I'm not sure you're telling me the truth. And I'm being honest. You get what I'm saying? If you tell someone, hey, actually, we just had a new currency announced 2 days ago. Like, what do you mean? But that's our reality. We've seen that. We've lived that reality. So just be really careful about those kinds of things, or at the very least, extreme transparency is important in those when you're getting into those deals. The reality, the challenge is, if we could access capital, long-term capital, or if we could deploy it into Zimbabwe, we could do things at a much, much larger scale than what we're currently able to do. But some of it also is just about also managing kind of my own risk appetite. I have young kids that still need to go to university and all those different things, and so I've got to be prudent in how I operate. If you're doing business in Zimbabwe, pay your work as well. Pay your work as well. What happens in Zimbabwe is, if you listen too much to guys that are local that don't pay their people well, you will think that doing business in Zimbabwe is much cheaper than what it really is. Okay? Because you ask people, so how much should I pay? So I've got a cattle ranching operation. And I'll tell you right now that the minimum wage for a cattle ranch worker in the country today on a monthly basis might be, I haven't checked in a while, but the last time I checked, maybe it's the equivalent of $50 per month is the minimum wage, right? But I can guarantee you that if I, with my cattle herd and the value and the quality of cattle that I have, if I paid my guys $50 each, I guarantee you there'll be so much stock theft, my cattle will be dying, will be neglected, and people will just be finding ways to take advantage of it. Now, obviously, human nature is human nature. There's no perfect situation. Sometimes you pay people well and they still take advantage of it. That's business. That's life. But I guarantee you that if you make decisions based off of, but the recommended minimum wage is, this amount, you're not going to take care of your people. So you actually have to look and see, okay, what is reasonable for what you're doing? And you have to be willing to take on sometimes the expenses that others might say don't really make sense. For my cattle operation, I've been doing it for 10 years. And it's been 6 years now since I've had somebody quit a job. Since 6 years. And the last person who quit, 3 months later, actually called and said, look, I shouldn't have left. I'm being honest. And part of it is because I do my best to pay them as well as I could. I'm paying for their kids to go to school and doing all these different things because those things don't cost me a whole lot. But because I'm working from overseas, I need that peace of mind. If I need to find a new farm, worker, how am I going to interview someone? Am I going to interview someone from Texas? Realistically, you get it. And so, if you can find good people take good care of them, because ultimately what you're paying for is not just their service, but you're also paying for peace of mind. And then the last solution that I mentioned is what I'm calling, partnering with high trust organizations. And that's so important. When you operate in a low trust environment, like we find ourselves oftentimes, partnering with high trust organizations is helpful. So let me give an example. I'm standing here in front of you at this exhibition that CEIF has put together. CEIF is known to be a high trust organization. So, when I show up and I stand in front of you people, you guys at least are willing to hear me out because of the fact that CEIF brought me here. But for CEIF to be willing to allow me to stand in front of you guys, I can guarantee you, Mike didn't just look at me and say, oh, he's a cool guy, let's set him up. You get it? They actually wanted to understand and know who we are. So they wanted to come to our offices in Harare. They wanted to understand, let's see the paperwork that shows that you guys actually own this development, that you've actually gotten all the permits the right way, you've done the things that you need to do. And so when you work with high trust organizations, they hold you to a high standard and from an accountability standpoint, but that actually helps separate you from everybody else. So CEIF is a partner of ours. CBZ Bank is a partner of ours. They are helping us sell stands as we speak. In fact, last week, just before the guys left Zimbabwe, I was getting emails about people that are ready to sign sales contract for some of our stands through CBZ properties. Again, when everybody's been burnt, the fact that somebody is hearing about us through CBZ just makes them think, okay, maybe let's take a little bit, let's take a closer look. If CBZ is willing to essentially kind of put their reputation on the line with these guys, at least let me hear what they have to say. So that's an important thing. I just want to kind of give a shout out to CBZ. This is not a sponsored. I do quite a bit of business in Zimbabwe, and with banks and things like that. And I've not dealt with any bank besides CBZ in Zimbabwe that honestly makes me feel like, these guys actually want my business. So many times I'll send emails to banks and send requests for information and things like that, and they go unread. Or somebody responds, we'll come back to you tomorrow, and then 2 months later, it's crickets, silence. But the guys at CBZ, when they say they're going to do something, they're going to do something. And I've really been impressed with them. Their new Ziki Mall platform is something that we're really excited about, because even as we're selling stands, I don't want to ask you if you're going to buy a stand from us. I don't want to ask you to send your deposit to your cousin in Harare so that they take that cash to our office, because we all know stories of people that send money to a cousin in Harare. And we actually they got a picture of a receipt. I went and I paid this money at this office, when that money didn't actually get there. Or you sent them $5,000, they only took $3,000 because school fees was due for their kid. That stuff happens all the time. And so we want, for you, when you buy from us, we want you to be able to pay directly to us. We're also hearing all these stories of these armed robberies and things like that that are happening in Zimbabwe. I don't want to sit with a bunch of cash in my office in Harare. That's a risk for me. And so us being able to partner with CBZ and kind of making sure that when you want to make a payment, you can pay us directly through their platform from here, from your bank account in the UK, use your credit card or whatever you want to do, and pay us directly. That's just a huge win. So just want to give them a shout out. Especially want to give a shout out to, I don't know, Chennai is not here, but the lady named Chennai from CBZ Properties. I hope you guys are paying her well. She's a rock star. I met her for the first time in Texas a few months ago at the expo. And every single thing she said to me when we were speaking in that hall, within a week of her being back in Harare, she was emailing me and texting me and sending me all these documents and all the things she promised. And every single time we need help, we had some issues where we were trying to open a bank account and we were trying to figure out how to deal with Zimra on some things. She passed it on to somebody else, and within hours, somebody else was calling me about trying to resolve this situation. So I'm just giving a shout out to CBZ and to CEIF. This is not a sponsored thing, like I said, but if you're going to do business, honestly, do business with high trust people, because in the long run, everybody wins when we do it that way. Okay. I'm going to pivot now and then stop talking to just tell you a little bit more about our Spitzkop Gardens. So, our company name is Velde Estates. Spitzkop Gardens is our very first development that we've done. We're about 80% of the way in terms of servicing it, so we've got sewer infrastructure, water infrastructure, and all of that stuff in place. We thought we would be, fast enough to, beat the rains, the last rainy season, to kind of now get to the roads and all that stuff. But then, God reminds us that, you're not God. And so anyway, so we're now at that place where we're starting to finalize our roads and, get the roads in place and finish that off. And so we expect that by the end of the year, we'll have finished everything and gotten all our compliance certificates and things like that, that we'll need for people to then start building and to then also kind of apply for your own title deeds and all of that. So that's work in progress, but we're really excited. We have a booth, a table in the main hall. Please check us out if you haven't already. And I think I can say that we're the only exhibitor here that's offering you a chance to win one whole year supply of Mazoe. So you need to make sure you stop by our booth, kind of scan the code and fill out your thing, because we're going to be announcing winners in a couple of hours. But yeah, 1 year supply of Mazoe is yours. So make sure you come and see us in Velde Estates. And just as I wrap up, I've got a video I want to show you, just less than 2 minutes of kind of what our development will look like when it's done. Because ours is a gated community with certain, you've got to pick a plan for the house you're going to try to build and all of this stuff. And we're just trying to do something really nice and really classy, but targeting kind of the people that are saying, look, I'm a first-time home buyer, first-time home builder. I don't have, $100,000 to buy a stand. But maybe I can buy a stand for 17,000 or 20,000 or less than 30,000. And that's really who we're targeting. So I'll play a video of kind of just to give you a sense of what we're developing. We'd love to see you again at the booth, after this, and then I will stop talking. But it's really been a pleasure. So I hope I can figure out how. We need tech support again. So we've got about 320 stands for sale here. It's mostly residential. 275 square meters are the smallest stands we have, going all the way up to about 500 square meters. And you'll pick from 5 plans or home designs that we have. It's mixed use, so there'll be some commercial stands, in there. And there's a nursery school, preschool for families with young kids. But yeah, this is going to be really neat, really special. We've really spent our time doing research on kind of world-class homeowners association rules and things that we're putting in place to protect your investment and make sure that if you come and live here, that you won't regret that investment, and that the standard that we're introducing, I think, will be something special. So these are just renderings of what it'll look like, to give you a sense, by the time we're done. And we do aim to see it all the way through, to protect your investment, but also we're hoping that we can build a reputation that allows us to do more of these in the future, and to, for everybody to be willing to trust us with their money. So again, if you have $17,000, you can buy a stand in this place. We've got payment terms: 30% deposit, 18 months to pay the balance. So please make sure you come and see us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manatsi.
Spitzkop stands are available now. Spitzkop stands are available now. Come and see me. I can get them for you for 20,000. 2 months no double, am I? Munati did my job for me. Bigging up CBZ. They're our next speaker. Please welcome Group CEO Lawrence Nyasema.
So, a very good afternoon once again. We are seriously behind time, so what I intend to do in 10 minutes is to share opportunities that we are seeing in Zimbabwe specifically and in Africa in general. I will not bore you with a lot of economic statistics. So, to get started, just over 11 years ago, a country in West Africa rebased their economy, the size of their economy. At that point, the value of annual economic activities, which is measured by GDP, was set at $270 billion US. But then they said, we realize we have not been correctly capturing activity in telecoms, activity in the arts, and by the way, the arts in Nigeria are very big. Whether it's music, whether it's film, whichever way you look at it. They also realized that they were not correctly capturing what was happening in financial services. So by rebasing, they moved the size of their economy or economic activity from 270 billion a year to 510 billion. And when they did that, they became the largest economy in Africa, larger than South Africa. But you know what? A beautiful thing happened soon afterwards. They were attracting foreign direct investment of about 15 billion before the rebasing. Soon after rebasing, they attracted 60 billion. Why? Because the world started to notice and acknowledge them. So let's go back to Zim. What we did last week was to rebase our economy as well. We moved from 35 billion to 44 billion. I have seen a lot of debate by economists doubting whether we are a 44 billion economy. But I was reminding some of them that, you know what, 10 years ago, when we were talking about the size of our economy, some of you were saying it's 20 billion. But even the World Bank was acknowledging that we were now a $35 billion economy. But let's not worry about statistics. My take is, it is in our interest as Zimbabweans to have a growing economy. And our role as CBZ is going to be to ensure that indeed we are a $44 billion economy, despite what the doubting Thomas is saying. And that's why I would like to share some economic opportunities that we are seeing. Very quickly, our economy is growing at about 5% per year, and we expect it to do so over the coming few years. The property sector is also growing, slightly below the 5%. I know a lot of you have got questions on the currency, but before I talk about the currency, let me talk about our foreign currency receipts. So if I go back 20 years ago, our total foreign currency receipts were about 5 billion, give or take a year. Fast forward to last year, we were on 13 billion. Therefore, we do not have a foreign currency problem, because we are now generating much more from exports, thanks to the diaspora and a few other areas. So if we are getting 13 billion and we spend about $1 billion, the currency issue should be an easy one. What we need to do is to make sure that our economic environment is low inflation. What has killed us in the past is high levels of inflation. I'm happy when I look at month-on-month inflation, it's currently fairly low, at around 1%, if not less. Then we need to be building our foreign currency reserves. And to be fair to the central bank, they are doing fairly well. This time last year, we had $250 million in foreign currency reserves. That's gold and US dollars. Fast forward to today, we are now on $750 million. But my challenge to the central bank and to all of us is to say, let's save at least $1 billion a year. So that by the time we get to 2030, we have 6 months import cover. Therefore, if you have got a low inflation environment and 6 months import cover, you can defend your currency. Diaspora insights. Let me start by thanking you once again. I did so last night. I will do so again today. As the UK, although there's just 130,000 of you, 20 times smaller than our population in South Africa, last month you overtook our people in South Africa in terms of remittances. And 28% of the 2.2 billion that we got last year came from the UK. So thank you very much. We actually expect those diaspora remittances to hit 3 billion by the time we get to 2030. Therefore, my concern about potential monocurrency reintroduction gets less and less as long as we export and you remit. But what makes me excited about the diaspora is I argue that in Zimbabwe, we actually have another economy that is as big as that 44 billion one. Where am I coming from? Generally, you send back about 10% of your earnings. And if 10% is 3 billion, it means 100% is 30 billion. So if we add what we have got back home and what we are generating, that's the potential that we have in Zimbabwe. And we can tap into that potential to take our economy forward. Then we've been looking at what we have been, for those who have been investing outside social support, where has the money been going to? Half of your investments have been going into property. So we are not lost being in this room. Interestingly enough, the other half has been going into agriculture. And when I look at agriculture, I would want to put a challenge to all of us in this room. We have started to do it properly, but we've got a great opportunity to enhance what we are doing in agriculture. Where am I coming from? When I look at our top 5 imports in the month of May, number 1 was petroleum products. And for that, that is the reason why we pray and we are partnering with Invictus as they explore on the possibility of us having gas and oil resources in Muzarabani, because that will significantly reduce what we import. Unfortunately, number 2 was maize. Yes, we are coming from a drought, but we should get to an extent where even if we have 7 years of drought, we have enough. And it talks to the need for us to have storage facilities as an investment opportunity for some of you. So not all of us have to be farmers. That's my message. There's a whole value chain that we can participate in. Then number 3 was the crude soya oil. Number 4 was electricity, and I supported the electricity because we have a shortage. But then number 5 was wheat. And almost 10% of the money we used on imports was on maize, was on crude soya, was on wheat. So it also gives me confidence that come 2030, if we replace those imports, how much would we have saved a year? More than $1 billion, isn't it? So all these things are possible, and I think they are within reach, provided we deploy our resources properly. I talked about the opportunities in Africa and in Zimbabwe. The biggest upside for us is going to be from population growth. I know we used to laugh at my friend, the former Registrar General, Vamdede. He was so enthusiastic about growing our populations, and then we did not understand because we were all focused on family planning. But you know what? I'm starting to think he was right. And Muhammad Zima, thanks very much for representing us. We were talking about 5. That's the average. Coincidentally, that's the average number of children they have in Nigeria. And there are now almost 250 million of them. Fortunately for Zimbabwe, we are going to be growing our population at times 2 the global rate of 1.1, which means we're going to be on 2.2. So that's where the opportunity comes from. We will need healthcare. We will need education. We will need food. We will need jobs. Not only for Zimbabwe, but for Africa. And that's what we should be exploiting. And then where are the specific opportunities? Energy. We are seeing the need for hydropower, we are seeing the need for solar, we are seeing investments going into coal, we are seeing investments going into gas. Water is an important one, therefore dam, then your highways and infrastructure, all those are major areas of investment that we are seeing. The role of CBZ in the diaspora, I will skip through a lot of this. And my last slide, I'm going to talk about the opportunity that we are going to bring to the diaspora. In 2012, as CBZ, we raised almost $100 million that we got from diaspora, both individual and institutional investors. We are bringing that opportunity back to yourselves. We are looking at a $50 million bond. We are actually going to be starting on the 1st of August in 2025. It's a 4-year bond. We believe the return is attractive. We are looking at SOFR plus 4.5%. So SOFR is currently, I would say, 4.5%. If we work on the basis that the Fed raise is going to be doing 2 cuts this year, that will take it to about 4%. 4 plus 4.5, that's 8.5%. It's unlikely that you get better returns than that in your current environment. And there was talk earlier on about high trust partners. So if we work on the basis that CBZ is a high trust partner, and CBZ is offering you 8.5% per annum, and will repay those funds in US dollars in 4 years' time, why would you not want to consider that as one of the investment opportunities? Then in closing, let me appreciate SIF and Patience for putting together another incredible panel. I would also want to express my appreciation to our embassy, the Public Service Commission, who also happen to be our shareholders in CBZ, for the support. Not only today, we were together in the United States, we find ourselves together here in Birmingham. So thanks very much for the continued support, and thanks everybody for coming and participating in this great event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence. Population growth of 2.2%. That is exciting to me. I already have 4 kids. Again, when guy is beating me, I think there's some competition and he always has to do better than me. But as has been said, the population growing means there's opportunities. People need to eat, they need to be clothed, they need to go to school. They need transport.
Leave your family
So
with
I know we hear
love
about
and
property,
dignity, not
but maybe there's
financial
other
burden.
opportunities inside and
At
around
Diaspora
property that we can
Insurance,
also look at
no medical
and make
checks
sure
are
that we
needed.
are part of that value
Guaranteed
chain
acceptance.
as things go forward.
Cover yourself
I'd like to
and
call our
loved
next
ones
speaker, please.
globally for diasporans and family back home.
The CEO of CEF,
We offer immediate cash
obviously
payout
put this event
within
and cross all
24
together.
hours.
Please give a warm
Choose how
welcome
you're
for
remembered
patience.
with our flexible plan, burial, repatriation, or cremation. Protect yourself and family, peace of mind guaranteed.